Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Strong words from BC's Premier over the random stabbing in Chinatown.
I am white-hot angry.
Why the man charged was allowed free after a long history of violence. Plus, climbing rents.
I think it's becoming more and more unaffordable.
What's to blame and how to fix it? Delayed and over budget. Criticism over Surrey's lack of hospital space and the potential fix now further down the road.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. A rare moment of frustration from BC's Premier today over word the suspect in the Chinatown triple stabbing this weekend has a violent history. He was released from a psychiatric hospital shortly before the incident took place. Michelle Gussoub now on the demand for answers.
3 people stabbed at random in Vancouver's Chinatown.
I am so angry. I am white-hot angry that this person was released unaccompanied into the community to have a devastating impact.
This is where 64-year-old Blair Donnelly is accused of attacking a young woman and a married couple on Sunday.
It defies any logical explanation.
In 2008, Donnelly was found not criminally responsible for killing his 16-year-old daughter Stephanie because of a mental disorder. The following year, when allowed back into the community, he stabbed a friend. On Sunday, Donnelly was out on another day pass from a Lower Mainland psychiatric hospital.
I'm sure it boggles the mind of all British Columbians, as it does me, that a series of decisions could have been taken that landed us in this place.
Documents from the BC Review Board reveal Donnelly's last hearing was in April of this year. It was decided he may have escorted and unescorted access to the community depending on his mental condition. A statement from Blaine Bray, the Executive Director of Forensic Psychiatric Services, says when making those decisions, the treatment team considers a variety of factors, including the patient's progress and mental status, and a review process is followed. EB has now promised a review into how decisions were made in this case and whether there are other potentially dangerous offenders that may be out on day passes. Michelle Gussoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
And the BC United is highlighting concerns over policing and public safety with the release of its platform on the issues. But as Mira Baines reports, the NDP says the opposition party's position keeps changing.
BC United leader Kevin Falcon stood on the steps in front of the Vancouver Law Courts to announce his public safety platform. He says the issue of repeat offenders hasn't been dealt with.
Here in Vancouver, we know that just 40 people were involved in 6,385 negative interactions with the police in 1 year alone.
Falcon's platform includes a 5-point plan. Falcon says when he becomes Premier, he will aggressively hire police officers to fill 500 vacancies, end decriminalization of illicit drugs, provide some offenders with a choice of addictions treatment or jail, treat all crimes seriously, and pursue drug dealers in civil court for selling lethal drugs.
Together, these steps will take us in a dramatically different direction so that we get away from the situation we find ourselves in British Columbia.
BC's public safety minister says the opposition party's platform is a flip-flop.
Well, it's hard to take Kevin Falcon seriously on what he announced today for a number of reasons. One day he and his party are in favor of decrim. Now they're saying they're not in favor of decrim.
The party also wants to fund body-worn cameras for all police in BC. BC United is releasing its platform as the party tries to drum up support and name recognition ahead of next year's election. The move also comes as federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre tours Vancouver Island. The popularity of that party seems to be rubbing off on the fledgling BC Conservatives, who are in direct competition with BC United.
Whether it feels that there's a threat on its right side, given that the BC Conservative Party seems to be doing relatively well at the moment. Polls suggest that it is enjoying greater recognition and some support. Again, in the wake of that BC United name change, perhaps there is a feeling that they need to shore up support.
Still, the NDP government is the party in power, and a provincial election is over a year away. The province plans to bring its Police Act reforms this fall. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Alleged Ponzi schemer Greg Martel has been found guilty of civil contempt of court, and a warrant has now been issued for his arrest. Martel is the disgraced Victoria mortgage broker who owes more than $250 million to 1,200 investors. In a ruling, a judge says it was clear Martel has not abided by numerous court orders compelling him to produce financial records. His whereabouts are uncertain, although he was rumored to be in Thailand at one point. Well, to the soaring rent situation across the country now, with Vancouver seeing a 13% increase year over year. A new report is putting some hard numbers to the difficult reality. Yvette Bren looks at the scramble for an affordable place to live.
At $1,850 a month, a one-bedroom apartment closer to the beach and free of roommates seemed like a steal.
I was like, okay, let's go. When we went there, I saw a lot of people outside already waiting. At first, I didn't understand. I was like, why are there so many people, right? And then it clicked. I was like, oh my God, all these people are here to see the place, just like us.
He's still hunting for a new home.
Not good, because then it becomes like Hunger Games, you know, like we're fighting to get the place.
Since 2019, the average rent in Canada has gone up and down, but rose by nearly 10% last year. And in the last 3 months, rent increased by an average of more than $100 per month.
I can't believe that. That's insane. I already pay so much money for rent. It's already like half my paycheck. Like, that's just ridiculous.
That's terrible, but they put more people on the street. Yeah. Seriously, they're going to put more people on the street. There's enough homelessness already. Yeah, people going to food banks and people going homeless. That's terrible.
Provinces are trying to balance rent control with concerns about inflation.
It's renters actually that are harmed the most. And we're seeing that now where there's such a chronic shortage of rental housing. And we have hundreds of thousands of people moving into the lower mainland in particular, most of whom are renters. So we need bigger solutions here.
It's a similar situation across the country, and housing analysts say there's no quick fix.
My advice to tenants is don't move.
He says Canada needs to get better at both gauging rental demands and encouraging developers to build affordable housing.
It's much more beneficial for a developer to build condos than it is to build rental.
So the shortage remains.
While we were waiting, more and more people start to come. Everybody was kind of like giggling, you know, smiling, because everybody was in kind of like shock.
Leaving renters lining up to pay record high rent. Yvette Bren, CBC News, Vancouver.
And coming up later in the show, we'll be live diving deeper into this issue with an SFU professor of finance. All right, to Surrey now, where the long-awaited new hospital is running 3 years behind and an extra $1 billion over the original budget. Provincial officials broke ground on the new facility today. It will bring 168 more hospital beds to the area, a second emergency department, and a new cancer center. But Health Minister Adrian Dix says it won't open until 2030, 3 years later than expected.
This is a fundamental investment that will be transformative for healthcare in Surrey. The option of not going forward is not a good option.
The new hospital was initially pegged to cost $1.72 billion. That budget has now ballooned to $2.88 billion. And the BC United is wasting no time in calling out the increased price tag.
It's announcement after announcement, but very little results. People want to see results, and the fact that now we've almost doubled the cost of this project is really concerning. It seems to be more and more expense on the public with less and less results.
The province says the increased costs are due to inflation, supply chain disruptions, and labor shortages. Others, like the Surrey Board of Trade, say while waiting for the hospital to finish, exponential growth is continuing there. Well, the 80-year-old Jericho Pier will live on after some much-needed repairs. The Vancouver Park Board has voted to fix the pier, which was damaged in 2021 and 2022 by strong winds and high tides. But the decision goes against a staff recommendation to have it removed. The staff report says the pier was at risk of further damage from climate events, and removing it would be an opportunity for reconciliation. Instead, the board voted to repair it at an estimated cost of $1.7 million. After an insurance claim, the city will be on the hook for a $350,000 bill. The rebuild is expected to be completed in 2025. Well, kids are settling into their routines for the new school year, and for many of them, that means going to a class in a portable. It's why we're doing a series this week on the use of school portables in British Columbia. As Justin McElroy reports, while the focus is often put on the school district of Surrey, the numbers show it's a province-wide issue.
The story around portables and Surrey isn't a new one, and it's a story that everyone talks about every single year. And it's fair to see why. Surrey is the second biggest municipality in the province, and it's a city where the number of portables has been an issue for some time. But what if we're looking at this story wrong? What if it's not about Surrey, and more about how British Columbia deals with portables in every city? So here's what we did. We asked the provincial government how many portables were in every school district in BC. However, they couldn't tell us. Instead, they said we would have to check with all 60 school districts. So we did. Here is a chart. Not surprisingly, Surrey has the most portables, with 361 of them compared to Burnaby at 132. But this chart doesn't adjust for how big a school district is. In other words, what percentage of students in any given district require a portable. And when you do that, the chart changes a little bit. Look at what we found. Yes, Surrey still has lots and lots of students in portables, but on a per capita basis, it's actually sort of in the middle for BC's biggest districts. Some places, like Vancouver, Victoria, where the number of children has been pretty stable the last few decades, only need 2 or 3 portables for every 1,000 kids. In other school districts, though, like Kelowna or Chilliwack, there are 5 or 6 portables for every 1,000 students. Now that's worse than Surrey, but it gets less attention because they're smaller cities. But the end result is the same. Once the number of students in a school district grows rapidly, so too does the number of portables. Surrey may be the place where we put the focus, but the numbers really show this is an issue across British Columbia.
That's Justin McElroy reporting tonight. Okay, the BC SPCA has seized 17 dogs from a North Okanagan area breeder after they were found in distress.
These dogs were living in unexcusable conditions, whether it was in urine and feces soaked, the crates had vomit. It was a situation where, again, there is no excuse for these animals to be living in those conditions.
The BC SPCA says 16 Yorkshire Terriers and 1 pregnant Pomeranian were suffering from health issues, including overgrown nails, matted coats, and poor dental conditions. They are now receiving care and will eventually be available for adoption. Well, there's a little bit of a problem at the Squamish Chief. Feces has been showing up on the trails around the rock climbing area, and no, it's not from animals.
Increasingly, we are finding that there are issues with human waste, particularly in our more remote crags. We call our climbing areas crags, cliffs. And at the more remote areas where there aren't toilet facilities, we are seeing an increase in human waste incidents.
The Squamish Access Society has fortunately come up with a plan. They are called waste alleviation and gelling bags. Basically, it's a dispenser with bags for climbers to take care of business and to help leave nature's bathroom just as clean as they found it. Not sure about that solution. Does that mean you have to carry the bag around with you as you climb the rest of the way?
I don't know. Yeah, my first thought when hearing that was that they were pooping while climbing. And, well, fortunately, we don't have any of that in the forecast. And not really any rain falling anymore either. We saw some light showers this morning. We did get a good amount of rain in some places across the lower mainland, but at least where I was, it was just really a light shower and didn't last very long. And it looks like that's going to be the story for a while now. We have dried up for the most part. You can see in the last 6 hours, we were mostly seeing a bit of rain passing through the central parts of Vancouver Island and up through just north of Vancouver for the most part. And if we look at our forecast for the next 24 hours, that rain is not coming here anytime soon. We're seeing a little bit north of Tofino. And if we take a closer look, we can see that it's mostly going to just miss areas like Kelowna and Kamloops. We did see some rain through central BC earlier today, but not really that much to speak of, just a bit of it pushing its way through that part of the province. So that rain is going to keep moving through the province, and then we dry up once again through the end of this week, meaning we don't really see any more rain in the forecast until next weekend, except for right along the coast. And here in Vancouver, it's the same thing. We get a bit of cloud tonight. We can still see some cloudy skies right outside, and then it clears up a little bit overnight before getting another cloudy morning tomorrow. That should clear up through the day, and we'll see a bit of sun in the afternoon, so that should be nice.
Definitely. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Health Canada has approved a new Moderna COVID-19 vaccine for all Canadians aged 6 months and older. It targets the Omicron subvariant XBB.1.5. As Christine Birak reports, it's expected to be rolled out alongside the fall flu shot in October.
With the latest COVID-19 shot now approved, this is the advice from Health Canada.
Individuals who are 5 years of age and older should receive 1 dose of the vaccine, regardless of their COVID-19 vaccination history.
The Moderna vaccine, along with 2 others still under review, including Pfizer, no longer include the original strain of the virus. Instead, they specifically target a current version of the Omicron variant that's expected to circulate this fall and winter.
In the last few weeks, we have started to see an increase in COVID-19 indicators across many areas of the country, including hospitalizations.
The most recent data show COVID-19 killing 48 Canadians in a week. And while far from the peak last year, there are still about 2,165 Canadians lying in hospital beds with the virus, an uptick from the previous week.
I see these patients, and essentially they're people who are coming in with their COVID, which has triggered off an underlying problem that they had.
Health officials insist people at highest risk of severe disease include adults over 65, long-term care home residents, and those with underlying medical conditions.
In that group of people with underlying conditions, those underlying conditions are principally people with active cancer who are being treated, people who are transplant recipients, and people who are under very active treatment for serious conditions.
The first doses of the new Moderna vaccine will start arriving this week and be widely rolled out by the provinces and territories in October. With another respiratory virus season fast approaching and hospitals still under pressure, doctors are hoping Canadians will start rolling up their sleeves for a flu and COVID shot at the same time. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Now, Moderna is recommending that the old bivalent vaccine no longer be administered in favor of the recently approved update, as it more directly targets subvariants. And for those who have not yet been vaccinated or are behind on their boosters, there are clear guidelines.
So if somebody is vaccine naive and has not had a vaccine previously, they're recommended at this point to get 1 dose of Moderna's vaccine. That's not going to be the rule for Pfizer. Pfizer is recommending added doses, but Moderna is recommending a single dose at this point. But stay tuned. I mean, that can easily change.
We showed you how rent in BC is soaring. After the break, we're live looking at what can be done about it. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. The week-long Invictus Games are currently being held in Germany. They are an international multi-sport event for injured soldiers founded by Prince Harry in 2014. One of the competitors representing Canada this year is a retired Armed Forces sergeant from Winnipeg.
Retired Army Sergeant Lana Taylor only learned how to swim 4 months ago.
I've always wanted to learn to swim, and I've always been afraid to swim. And with the Invictus groups, they encourage you to take on something new for your recovery, and I didn't think there was anything that could be better or more than conquering my fear of that and having the confidence of doing something that I couldn't before.
Do you love the pool now?
I do. I am going to keep swimming. I really love it.
Taylor's career in the armed forces spans 3 decades. The Winnipegger first started serving in her teens and retired when she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, or MS, 7 years ago.
I was pretty shocked at the time because I at that point felt invincible, thought I could do anything forever, didn't think there'd be a limit on my physical abilities. But after learning what I could do, and I learned that, with exercise you can improve things, with nutrition you can improve things. So over the last 3-4 years especially, I've been working a lot on adjusting as much as I can adjust within my control to make the MS as manageable as possible. It was a big challenge, and it's something I was very scared of, and something that at 48, and with MS and other injuries that I have to deal with, I was able to take on, learn, conquer, and my kids are there to see.
The Invictus Games was founded by Prince Harry, who is a military veteran himself. The purpose of the Games is to give current military and retired, injured, and ill servicemen and women a path forward in rehabilitation. Taylor says the Games mean so much to those who have served their country.
You go from being a soldier, incapable, confident, do anything they ask you to do, you do it, to realizing that your health has impacted that. You can no longer do that. And then in many cases, you're released from the military because they need fit people, understandable. The Games has given an opportunity so that you have a task again, and your task is your sport. And then they bring in the team, and you do your training camps, and you have your team again. There is nothing more powerful in the world than going from not doing something to being able to do something, and having the support of the people around you who understand, because we are all on the same path.
The Invictus Games take place in Dusseldorf, Germany from September 9th to the 16th. Marjorie Dowhouse, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, if you live in BC, chances are high you're feeling the squeeze from the rising cost of living. Earlier in the show, we brought you a story about how rental prices are soaring. For more on this, I'm joined live by Andrei Pavlov. He's a professor of finance at SFU's Beatty School of Business. Andrei, Rentals.ca's latest report says rent for a one-bedroom apartment in BC climbed 13% over the last year. In Vancouver, it costs an average of about $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom. A lot of finger pointing happening here, but what do you actually think needs to change to get a handle on rent prices?
Well, I believe that report. I think that's quite accurate, and it's really quite striking, especially considering that many units are under rent control. So really the rent on new units has gone up tremendously. CMHC report recently quoted a number like 24%. That is on new leases. So the rent increases are really quite striking. And I think the explanation is really quite simple, not easy to fix, but really very simple. And it is that we have been undersupplying the market, especially the rental market, for a decade or more. And when you undersupply something, the price goes up. That's the only way the market can clear.
And when we talk undersupply, I mean, governments aren't building enough affordable housing. We know that, enough rental housing. What's the incentive for developers to do that, given that it's more profitable for them to build other types of housing?
Actually, the reason it's more profitable to do other types of housing is that the government, municipal and provincial, are putting up all kinds of constraints on rental housing development. They're starting with the permitting process and all the building requirements, to things like the Rental Protection Fund and other government initiatives that sound good on paper and are really designed, in theory at least, to protect renters. But the net effect is that they make it much riskier and much more expensive to build rental properties in Vancouver and in BC in general. And the net result is we build very, very little rental units, far less than we should be.
Do you see this changing anytime soon? You're talking about how complicated it is, at the municipal level, at the provincial level, for developers to have those incentives. So, what's going to change?
Well, it can change very easily by the government stepping down, provincial and municipal, and stepping back and allowing developers to do what they do best, which is provide more supply. Of course, it's going to take time for supply to catch up. If this is a problem that has been a decade in the making, it's not going to be resolved overnight, but it can take the steps to start building more and start supplying sufficient rental units now, so that at least a decade from now, we're not in the same situation that we are now.
Andrei Pavlov is a professor of finance at SFU's Beatty School of Business. We're talking rent prices now have gone up significantly across the country and especially here in British Columbia. Thank you for joining us live tonight.
Thank you.
A disaster beyond comprehension. Entire neighborhoods washed away in a wave of death. We take you to Libya next.
It's one of those trendy downtown bars. People sitting around making small talk, reading magazines. Except instead of killing off brain cells, the proprietors of this establishment claim to rejuvenate them.
Yeah, we do deliver flavored oxygen.
Yes, oxygen is what they are dispensing here. $17 a snort. Average time of consumption, 20 minutes.
Detect some orange flavoring and nothing yet, except it feels like I'm in the hospital with intravenous or something. But is it comfortable? Oh, sure.
It smells kind of funny as it wafts up your nose, and this is definitely not the most attractive accessory for sitting around in a bar. But hey, this place makes some pretty good claims.
Delays cell aging process or stimulates blood circulation. Isn't that a medical claim?
Not necessarily. That's just a matter of, that's common sense stuff. Physiologically, I mean, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to figure out that if your body, if the hemoglobin in your blood itself is much more efficient, quite obviously it's going to lower the stress levels.
This is the storage room. The goods are stored here and sent via pipes out to the front room.
It's identical to what you would find in a hospital with the same specifications.
Bill used to own a leasing company. He got the idea for his oxygen bar from a company in Toronto, the only other city to have one, even though sports teams, hospitals, and even Michael Jackson have been using them for years. Located right outside Vancouver's new library, where 8,000 people a day walk by, if oxygen is going to fly, it should be successful here. And while doctors may dispute whether or not it actually makes a difference, the customers seem pleased.
I definitely feel different. I feel like something is coming out of this tube. I haven't quite identified it yet.
Deborah Goebel, CBC News, Vancouver.
A Canadian politician was in Washington today to talk about his experience as the target of political meddling by China. As Katie Simpson reports, Conservative MP Michael Chong called on the U.S. to work with Canada to counter foreign interference.
It is rare for a Canadian member of Parliament to be the key witness in a hearing on Capitol Hill. Michael Chong's invitation to Washington to tell U.S. lawmakers what it's like being the apparent target of multiple Chinese foreign interference campaigns underscored the urgency of the problem.
Foreign interference is a serious national security threat to Canada. It threatens our economy, our long-term prosperity, social cohesion, our parliament, and our elections.
Chong outlined Canada's biggest concerns, including Chinese attempts to silence dissidents abroad and disinformation campaigns, offering up a series of solutions on how Ottawa and Washington can better share intelligence in a bid to educate voters in real time about interference threats.
One way to counter it is to make it public, to go public with the intelligence, to tell members of the public, members of Congress, members of Parliament, here's what exactly is going on, to arm citizens and elected officials with the information they need to protect themselves. So best practices on how to do that during elections and between elections.
Members of Congress welcomed the ideas, thanking Chong for his willingness to share his story.
It takes an enormous amount of courage, and I just want to let you know how much we admire it and appreciate it, because it takes people like you to speak out, even though you do so with threats and risks to your family.
With plenty of goodwill from the Americans, the challenge now is turning these ideas into plans of action as election season looms in both countries. Katie Simpson, CBC News, London, Ontario.
Let's go to Libya now, where we're getting a clearer picture tonight of the extent of deadly flooding over the weekend. More than 5,000 people have been killed and at least 10,000 people are said to be missing. This after a powerful storm swept through the country's northeast. Paul Hunter shows us what's left in the wake of the catastrophe and a warning. Some of the images are disturbing.
In the Libyan city of Derna, the place hit hardest by the catastrophic flooding, utter devastation. Say witnesses, during the torrential rain late Sunday came a crackling boom as two dams in the nearby countryside collapsed. That sent, in effect, a tsunami of water that tore through Derna, sweeping away entire neighborhoods. In the city of some 100,000, say some roughly a quarter of it has been left in ruin. These are among the dead, now left all but abandoned on sidewalks and roadways. Thousands more are believed buried in the silt and rubble, or just as likely, simply washed out to sea. Outside the city, the mass graves have begun. It is a horror show. These are victims of the storm, he says. We need help. A challenge for international aid agencies is that the country remains politically divided, with rival governments complicating rescue work. Aid workers tell CBC News their priorities are many and urgent.
Shelter is the first one. We're talking about the thousands of people that don't have a place where to stay. And then all the basic needs, where they lost everything. Of course, some of them, unfortunately, lost their family, relatives, and friends. But all of them, they lost house, they lost livelihoods, they lost jobs.
This video, showing where one of the dams used to be, underlines the sheer volume of water that broke through. Many already suggest years of neglect in Libya toward its infrastructure, including the dams, may well have led to the collapse and to the misery that has now only barely begun. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
West to Morocco now, where nearly 3,000 people are confirmed dead in Friday's earthquake. Search and rescue teams from 4 countries are currently in Morocco, and the government there is under pressure to accept more help. Chris Brown is on the ground, where in many places local residents are digging through rubble with their bare hands, hoping to reach survivors before it's too late.
Well, we've come to the town of Annecy. It is right in the middle of Morocco's earthquake zone, and all around us there are villages that have been affected, many of them totally destroyed. People will not be able to go back to their homes at all, and some of them are hurt, and that's why the military has set up a hospital here to look after them. And just in the time we've been here, we've seen all kinds of injuries. Some people have come in with broken bones, other people have come in exhausted and dehydrated, But there's also a huge psychological component to this as well. We've seen one woman who didn't lose anybody, but did lose her home, and her whole village is gone. And her husband told us she just really couldn't cope. The doctors had to give her medication. There was really nothing else they could do for her. Same with kids. We talked to one dad who brought his son in because he had a fever, but at the same time, he also just wanted him to play with other kids, play with Lego, because so many of the things that were normal in his life have been totally taken away. Over here, off to the right, there's a whole bunch of blue tents. Well, this is like entire villages that have been moved and put right there. People have been transplanted to this new reality next to this hospital. There is no long-term security at all, and it's going to take people a great deal of effort to see a future for them, and right now, so many that we've talked to here just don't see it. Chris Brown, CBC News in Annecy, Morocco.
Drag performers, the targets of growing protests. The threat of violence is very real and terrifying. We speak to organizers and protesters next.
These days, Britt Chevrier cracks open a non-alcoholic beer to relax. But that wasn't always the case. Before the pandemic, she considered herself to be a gray area drinker. She functioned well at work, was financially stable, and maintained close relationships. But sometimes she thought her alcohol consumption was on the cusp of the danger zone. Then came COVID-19. Suddenly there was a lockdown and time, lots of time. Chevrier used alcohol as a coping mechanism.
We also saw a lot of promotion around alcohol during that time. I think that we all, in unison, within our community and within the media and our society, started to lean in a little bit more on alcohol for that reason, because it was a scary time and we didn't really feel like we had many options other than to just hold on and live day by day.
Chevrier noticed that drinking in lockdown became a huge focus on social media.
Isolation drinking games and drinking Olympics. And I think it was just to lighten the mental load. So it had good intent, but ultimately, again, the vacation did end, the isolation did end, and I wonder where that left a lot of people, because it certainly had a negative impact on my own drinking.
Experts say that during the pandemic, options for alcohol home delivery, curbside pickup and takeaway, and app orders increased. Lauren McDonald heard how people were drinking more and earlier in the day as the pandemic progressed. Some went from 2 bottles of wine every few days to 2 cases.
And if you have to have a drink at 8 in the morning, and then a drink after lunch, that's a lot. That's a lot of drinking. So the sober curious, I think they didn't enjoy speaking with me on the phone because they saw what they were becoming.
McDonald says some alcoholics relapsed during the pandemic and a large number have not come back from it. After giving up alcohol altogether in March 2021, Chevrier created a social media account and blog called Sober Flatlander.
A lot of people perceive sobriety still in a way that suggests that we kind of have to be hush-hush about it, or we shouldn't be proud of it because we're admitting that we had a problem with our substance use.
Chevrier hopes to fight the stigma around being open about sobriety and inspire others to dump the alcohol for good. Laura Sharpaletti, CBC News, Regina.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohith Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Apple has unveiled its latest version of the iPhone. One of the biggest changes for consumers will be a switch from Apple's proprietary Lightning charging cables to USB-C.
The same cable can charge Mac, iPad, iPhone, and even AirPods Pro 2nd generation, which is updated with a USB-C connector.
Apart from better compatibility with Apple products, USB-C is also the standard for many other electronic devices and brands. It offers faster data transfer speeds. The company had to make the change to meet European regulations. Apple also unveiled its new watch and earbuds at today's product launch. Darius Madavi joins us now with the forecast. I know we're not supposed to be using our phones, well, the weather apps on the phones, right? Because they're not as accurate as you are.
Well, thank you. I like to think that too. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about the new phone, but I realized my AirPods still have the Lightning port. My work phone has the Lightning port, so it doesn't really do much for me. I'm still stuck with it for a while yet. But what can you do? At least they're making the change. Let's turn to the weather now. People probably don't want to hear me ramble on about phones. So we still have this heat wave in the Atlantic. I thought we should take a look at Hurricane Lee and where it's sitting, because it is making its way up the coast, and the newest forecasts do have it heading right for Atlantic Canada. Now, we're still a while out. That could change, but we are expecting to see at least some impacts in places like Nova Scotia as that storm makes its way up. But if we take a look here, we have this part of the Atlantic that is quite a bit cooler than, or is at least somewhat cooler than it usually is, unlike the rest of the Atlantic. And the reason for this is because we saw Hurricane Franklin pass through this area just a couple weeks ago, and that dragged some of those cooler waters from underneath up to the surface. And so since we have Hurricane Lee forecasted to pass over this part of the ocean over the next couple days, that should mean that it loses quite a bit of strength as it passes over this area, meaning that it shouldn't be as bad a storm when it makes its way up into either the northeast of the U.S. or to the Maritimes. Now, it could still be, will still be a very dangerous storm as it does. The wind speeds will still be over 100 kilometers per hour, but it's also going to be heading into these cooler waters that are typically around Nova Scotia. Sometimes it can be misleading to look at these images of how different the temperatures are from usual. It looks very red, but waters are still cooler here, not warm enough to sustain a hurricane. So it will lose quite a bit of strength as it moves into Canadian waters. So a bit of good news. With that being said, the drought rating, this is still last week, so we don't get the update until Thursday. But given we just got some rain, I thought it'd be a good idea to take a look. I wouldn't say we got enough rain to have any measurable difference in the drought rating. I'd expect it will stay fairly the same because we've had quite a dry stretch. Otherwise, we're still going to have a couple dry days before we get that update, so probably not much change. In terms of temperatures, tomorrow we come up a little bit in some places where we've had that cloud because we will have the sun finally hitting the surface once again. Well, finally, after a couple days of cloud. So temperatures come up a little bit in places in the south. In Vancouver, we're still at 19, but by the end of this week, we'll see that come up a little bit more as well. In terms of rainfall, we took a look at this earlier, but I think it's just important to remember a bit in the north and a bit in sort of western or eastern BC, but really not too much to speak of. As we get into tomorrow, we see this real clearing pattern, quite a bit of sun through the province. And here in Vancouver, we get some clear skies for a while yet. Don't see that rain return until maybe this weekend.
Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Drag story times. That's when drag performers read storybooks to kids. And they've been the target of growing tension and hostility across Canada, including right here in BC. Performers now say they're under siege, but refuse to back down. Anya Zolochowski is looking at what's behind the tension.
Are you ready for Faye and Fluffy story time?
Hi, everyone. All are welcome here.
It's supposed to be the simplest of things, silly even.
If you're happy and you know it and you really want to show it, if you're happy and you know it, do all three.
Funny stories, singing, dancing.
Wow.
But the mood shifts.
A dozen protesters who've steadily been trickling in. They have signs that say there are only two genders, that drag sexualizes children. And that's something that's been happening a lot in the last year because storytime events just like this one have increasingly become targets of hate.
Oh.
It's a public space, so this is a legal protest, and the message is clear. They do not want people like Faye and Fluffy reading to kids.
Thank you. It's been so beautiful. It's been so nice here.
Stay away from our kids! Stay away from our kids!
Nothing like this has ever happened to them.
Keep out! Keep out! Keep out! Keep out!
That's probably the most.
That was gross.
The most aggressive that I think we've ever witnessed.
I've never felt like that before.
The next day, I meet with Faye and Fluffy, aka JP Kane and Caleb Robertson, to ask about this growing hostility.
I think that if they want to come and hold out their signs, we can't stop that. We don't need to stop that. But don't stop us from doing what we're doing.
Exactly.
It's so uneducated about what things are about drag queen story time. They can point to that and even just simply be like, well, ew, gross, those men want to be women. Does Faye look like she's trying to be a woman? No, these are our characters.
Even though both of us were having a huge wave of different kinds of emotions, we remain focused in delivering what it is that we do, which is celebrating differences and uniqueness and a joy of literacy and being silly and fun.
Stoked by far-right groups online, some people are fundamentally opposed to drag, coinciding with a rise in police-reported anti-LGBTQ hate crimes.
Ready, Butch? I'm ready. Because I got this.
Yeah.
Every one of us can be resilient. Every one of us can persevere.
At the Peterborough Library, Betty Baker is singing about resilience.
Here's the chorus. You've got this.
You've got this.
Keep going.
Keep going.
But outside, protesters and supporters have been showing up since she started last year. I asked Betty, whose real name is Isaac Maker, what's fueling all of this?
And so a lot of those are kind of tied into the idea that educating kids about queerness is inherently grooming them and going to turn them gay and trans, which is their worst fear. More than the protests, the threats have been wild. We had to cancel a story time back in December at Lavender and Play.
So what's it like to see these threats and protests at your kids' events?
Oh, it breaks my heart. Oh. Sorry.
Okay.
I didn't think I was going to get emotional.
Okay. Have your moment.
It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. I know that what my kid is doing is about joy, and it's about being that role model for people. I know that it comes from a good place.
Posts like this one, beating Dorothy within an inch of her life, have scared Isaac and Mom Michelle.
There have been quotes about complete misinformation about trans people, complete misinformation about gay people. And while it may be peaceful outside the library, that is hateful rhetoric.
This is Pastor Ben Inglis. He organized Peterborough's first protest.
They are communicating the acceptability and
normativeness of the trans lifestyle.
Protests here have attracted all sorts, including people from the self-described Freedom Convoy and this well-known white nationalist.
But why block or get in the way of people who have a different faith from going?
If you saw a child, a 3-year-old child, attempting to cross a 4-lane highway, would you say, oh, that's not my child, therefore I have no obligation to say anything?
How do you respond to families who are concerned that such protests are encouraging violence, targeting LGBTQ+ people and their families?
There's lots of things that pass for hate crimes right now, where I would call that freedom of speech.
What is the end game?
I would love to see drag story hours dry up and be erased from public memory. These are symptoms of a society in decay. You don't treat a disease by dealing with the symptoms. And the only hope for our nation is repentance.
To be clear, trans people and drag performers are not a disease, and Ben Inglis only represents one local movement. That's why we met Timothy Caulfield at the University of Alberta.
It's the same community that was anti-vax, anti-COVID protocols.
He studies some of the other groups linked to these protests.
It's a community that is largely, I want to be careful not to overgeneralize, but it's a community that seems to be fueled by misinformation, by rage.
He says there's overlap between the anti-vax movement and anti-LGBTQ hate.
Because if you disagree with them or tell them they're wrong or say that this is misinformation or this is about hate, they immediately retreat to, well, you don't want to protect our children? And unfortunately, that strategy can be very effective.
We are now calling the police.
Last February, this man stormed into a story time at a Calgary library.
As a parent of kids in here, you need to get out.
Today is the first story hour since then, featuring Ida Cupcake and King Neptune. Mary Capusta is with the library.
I would clarify that we would not consider that a protest. That was a level of disruption and honestly some scary activity that happened inside of our spaces, creating, I'll be honest, a level of fear and intimidation in that space.
Calgary introduced a safety bylaw inspired by anti-drag hate. Protesters must be 100 meters away from the entrance. On this morning, half a dozen have gathered.
Some gender confusion.
Shane Robbins says he's part of the Basic Freedom movement.
So this event has been happening for 5 years, and I'm wondering why now? Why are you protesting it now?
Because it's come to our attention, because they're really pushing it now in the wake of the COVID narrative. This is a demonstration of how gender fluidity theory is the official state religion of Canada. Justin Trudeau, its high priest.
Using unconstitutional bylaws to keep us at bay.
2 men from that corner come inside. But police make it clear they cannot cause a disturbance. King Neptune doesn't expect to change anyone's mind.
For myself, not only am I a drag performer, but I'm also transgender, and so I walk through the world knowing that there's people around there that think that my very existence is inappropriate. For me, the relation of calling it grooming or using these slurs against us is just a rehashing of what the gay community used to face 20 years ago.
I started doing drag when I was 15, and that was a fantastic experience for me. It gave me so much confidence. It gave me so much love for myself.
Isaac, remember Betty Baker, says the protests are not really about drag at all.
When I was 15 or 16, they would have been like, oh, Betty's being groomed by her family. But as soon as I'm 19 and I'm doing story times, it's like, you're a bad person, you're a groomer. And that switch is just so wild. And it really, they don't want people to be queer no matter what. And that's the bottom line of it.
Faye and Fluffy, JP and Caleb, know who their audience is.
We love doing this, and this is meant for communities who are accepting, and people who are accepting, and people who really love their kids.
So Faye and Fluffy are sticking around.
Coming up, a 26-year-old Vancouver breakdancer prepares to perform on the biggest stage of all, the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. With the changes to how Canada is able to access journalism online and on social media, we want to assure you that when you're looking for CBC News, you'll always be able to find us. Wherever you are in BC, local news, breaking stories, and the latest from around the world is at your fingertips any time of the day with the free CBC News app and online at cbcnews.ca. Download the CBC News app and stay connected wherever you are.
World champion b-boy Philip Kim, also known as Phil Wizard, is set to make his Olympic debut at the 2024 Summer Games in Paris. The 26-year-old from Vancouver shared his story with us on what it took to be a professional breakdancer.
I thought about giving up many times, but something inside me pushed me forward.
When I started in Vancouver, there was a local crew called the Now Never Crew. They were performing in front of the art gallery, and I saw it and I was kind of blown away. I thought, oh, this looks super cool. I want to give it a try. And that was kind of my introduction to the dance. I'm definitely excited to hopefully go to the Olympics and also the Pan Am Games as well. It should be a lot of fun. But at the same time, my kind of mentality with breaking, with any event that I go to, is I just kind of take it with a grain of salt. I'm going to have the best time that I can. I'm going to do the best that I can. My motto has always been the same, which is like stay ready so I don't have to get ready. I would say I'm more focused now, and there's a lot more like physical conditioning. But at the same time, for any event, I never wanted to change the way that I dance. I never wanted to change the way that I approach it. I think I've made it this far, being myself, being authentically myself, and kind of representing myself on the stage. So that's what I'm going to keep doing, and hopefully continue to successfully do that, but we'll see.
Keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming.
There are so many characters. It's like watching a superhero movie. Like it's like trying to compare Batman and Superman. They're very different, you know. And maybe one day Superman will win, maybe one day Batman will win. But they approach the way they approach whatever they do is super different, but they're equally as powerful. And I'm looking forward to more people saying it.
What am I chasing now? The Team Canada dream.
That's kind of the biggest thing and the biggest opportunity that comes from something like the Olympics. It's a platform that we normally would not have access to. And so it's people that normally would not see breaking. And that's the most exciting thing for me, for people to see it and fall in love with it, like I said, because when I was a kid, this was what I fell in love with. This was everything to me. And I hope to see that spark in other people as well.
Awesome stuff. Can't wait to watch him at the Olympics next summer in Paris. All right, that is our show. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. We now leave you with portraits from last night's Beyoncé concert in Vancouver. Thousands turned up to BC Place clad in silver, and CBC photographer Ben Nelms was there to catch all the fierce looks.